David, Tim, how you guys doing?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Doing
Good.
fantastic.
Yeah, Tim,
Good.
thanks for joining us too. So, Dave, what are you going to talk about today? This is some really interesting stuff, and this gets to the core of some kind of solutions that we're doing as well. I want to dig into this. This is going to be
Yeah.
fun.
So what I'm going to work on today is that I'm going to use an OPC server. It's Kepware in this case, and I'm going to take those tags and I'm going to bring into HighByte and their intelligence hub. And then what I'm going to do with that intelligence hub is that I'm going to publish that data to an MQTT broker, and I'm also going to push it to a cloud instance of Microsoft Azure. And that does it all in one tool. And you might ask yourself, well, there's plenty of tools out there that'll take OPC tags and push it out somewhere. Why would I want to use HighByte? Well, the reason why is because with all of those other tools, all you're getting is that raw tag data. You're getting time, you're getting quality, you're getting value. And that makes it very difficult to do any kind of data analytics because you end up with all these different tags out there that are all unique, but you have a very difficult time trying to get those into something that makes sense and use context. So what the HighByte Intelligence Hub does is it actually takes those values, it allows you to add context and data to it, and then you can publish it out so that when you get ready to go in and do, whether it's your dashboard processes or you want to do some AI or machine learning on that tag, you know exactly what it is that you're trying to build. So we're going to do that in HighByte. So any questions on the technicality of it?
So then, once you get into Azure, what are you doing with it from there?
So from there, I'm actually going to take it over into Power BI, and I've built a dashboard in there just showing you what that data looks like and how quickly it is to take that data and what it looks like and what you're getting on the back end.
And then what would the idea be for going into MQTT? So it's almost, I imagine I'm drawing a picture in my head. So you've got the OPC tags, you're publishing them then to, let's say, MQTT, and then separately to Azure, Azure for Power BI and the MQTT broker. Or is it that the data is going into MQTT broker and then it's going into Azure and then to Power BI?
It's two different instances. It's showing you from the same tool set. You can do both of those things at the exact same time and use them for different purposes. Now, keep in mind, that's a one way. It's just taking data and moving it from some place to another place. But it means that anything that uses and supports MQTT with the Sparkplug-B protocol, that you can now be a consumer of that data in context. And I'll show you what that looks like when we get to that point. Now, again, just be realistic. Oftentimes, you're probably taking that OPC data and moving it into, say, a historian or moving into a SCADA solution or an IoT solution already. But this just shows you another capability that the tool will do. Or we can take that we can actually subscribe to an MQTT broker and still push that data in. So if you want to be a subscriber to a broker through the HighByte Intelligence Hub, you can do that as well and do the exact same thing. So just showing you some of the flexibility and capability of the tool and what it does.
Okay, and I think what I might do is after we go through this, I'm going to make sure that I understand this, and then after we drop off, I might draw a little diagram to make sure I got it, and then I'll post that diagram with this video so that
Oh, yeah,
make sure that
that'd be great.
it all just
Yeah,
kind of
that'd be great. We're kind of getting into the weeds here. This is going to be deep. So
right, exactly.
yeah,
Okay,
so the actual use case that I've developed here is that, again, we're going to utilize that same unified namespace using ISA 95. So we have the G5, we're going to be at the South Park plant again, we're going to be over in the utility area, and we got some compressors. So I've built in a compressor model and a motor model, and we're going to take that data, and that's what we're going to push up. So, this is really important, especially if you are in the AI ML space for assets, is that if you're wanting to take that information and get both process and reliability data and do something with it, stick around. This is really for you.
we've been talking with some maintenance reliability people even just recently about some of their
Mm-hmm.
compressors, and this is close to their heart. So
Yeah, exactly. So this is the home screen, and with everything, you got to start off by creating some connections. And I've already created some connections in here. The one we're going to use, of course, is Azure. We're going to talk to Kepware, and we're also going to take it into, I'm using Mosquito for my MQTT broker. That's what I do for most of my MQTT, although you saw EMQ there as well. That is my preferred for more of an enterprise application. So In connecting to it, this is going to be very familiar if you've connected to OPC endpoints before on Kepware. It's just to have your host, your port, the basic sign, those types of things. I'm going to bring up the OPC UA. So my Kepware disappeared. That was interesting.
Yeah, I saw it open before.
Oh, well, yeah, it is. That's the weird thing.
Oh, there it is.
Well, yeah, it's here, but there's another admin tool that I wanted to pop up here that's very important, and I'm not sure why I'm not able to do it. All right, so we need to connect, and this should be very familiar to you in terms of connecting to an OPC endpoint. One of the things you want to make sure that you get your setting up on the Kepware server, and that's what I wanted to show you, is that you want to make sure that there's both a sign and encrypt on that setting, because this only uses sign. It doesn't do a sign and encrypt. So it's kind of a little pro tip that you should show off to people. The really neat thing about this connection is because the background, the DNA of the folks at HighByte come from OPC and Kepware, so you can actually browse right into any one of those tags, and that's exactly what we're going to do here when we get this all set up. So that's our connection in through there. So let's go back here. I've done the same thing for Mosquito. So again, this is just the exact same way that you want to get into your Mosquito broker and just publish to that. So it's all the same address. You do have the Sparkplug protocol that gets saved there as well. And then finally, the last connection is into Azure. And when you do that, this connection string, I'm going to show you where to get that. That's probably the most challenging part of getting connected into Azure, is just getting this connection string in there. But again, I will show you how to do it. And again, if you want to create your own connection, just to show you, there's a lot of, so we'll just put in a demo connection, and you can take a look at all the various protocols you can put in here. So we could actually take this exact same payload and put it into AWS IoT Sitewise. You have Event Hub, IoT Hub. You can put it into a REST client, MQTT, Sparkplug B, OPC, put it into SQL, MySQL. I mean, just everything you can do. And you can actually pull from all of those data sources in the exact same model and then publish all of that payload as one topic into wherever it is that you want to go with it. So pretty wicked cool in terms of some of the functionality that's here.
So let me catch up with you first. So you have just reviewed in HighByte, you're setting up the connections to Kepware and to Azure, and also I think to Mosquito and to EMQ. Like, you're just setting up all the connections so far in HighByte. Okay.
Yeah, cool. That's all we've done. And so the next thing, oh, go ahead.
No, and here the MQTT broker is Mosquito, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm using Mosquito broker for this.
Great.
Cool. So this is where we get into the power of the model. Is now we're going to build out, or the power of the tool is through the use of building models. So here I have a motor instance, and I have a compressor model and a motor model. And so you'll see here that I have built in, or some of those, that context I'm putting in is I now have an area, I have a site, and I have an asset ID. And then I'm also bringing in some states of that actual compressor. So it's discharge pressure, temperature, flow. Again, we're going to use a vibration sensor on there. And then, of course, the state of the compressor, so you can see how often it's turning off and on. You'll notice that I also have this motor down here. Well, what the models allow you to do is you can actually embed models inside of a model. So if you think about a compressor, it's typically a motor and a compressor, or if you have a pump, you'll have a motor and a pump. Same type of thing. Well, this motor model can get used throughout. And really, on one of the last applications we talked about was an instrument air dryer system, where not only do you have a compressor, you're going to have an air dryer. So you can make that system with a compressor and an air dryer. And then inside that compressor, you now have that motor as well. So you're actually 3 deep in the models.
When we're talking about models, are you talking about effectively the fields, the data fields or tags that represent the state of that piece of equipment, or are you talking about more intelligence, so to speak, in there to build out the model?
So the model is just giving us the payload for what's going to be in that. It's giving the names of all of the payload that you're going to bring through. So it's
Okay.
going to define this is the type of information that's coming through, and it'll make a lot more sense once you see it or how it's actually being used.
Okay. Let me just a general question to Tim. Tim, are you following so far? Any questions?
I am. I follow the models. I'm curious to see whether or not a model is meant to represent more than just one PLC worth of data, or if this model will actually be receiving data from multiple sources and combining it all together into one model. So, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah, so in this particular application, I only have one data source. It is my OPC server. And again, I chose that because there's a lot of information that's already in an OPC where it makes sense. But, as I mentioned earlier, I could have SQL data. I could have MQTT data. I can have all kinds of raw data coming into this. That's all now going to get built in.
And you would put them into a shared model. So one model might represent data from multiple sources.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, so the model is, this is just the structure. This is the thing we're going to build, right?
Yeah.
So it's where you build the instance of that model is now where we're going to say, okay, I want to model all of my, say, compressors and motors throughout my entire enterprise. This is the data I need in order for the information and how I want to consume it. So now I'm going to go through all of my plants. I'm going to say, okay, I need a compressor 1 and compressor 2. Again, you can have multiple instances or multiple instances of this type of model. So models, if you have a compressor anywhere in your enterprise, you can use this model and publish that data into whatever your destination is, and it'll all have the exact same structure and data to it.
Tim, does this sound like class and objects kind of idea in software development?
Yeah, exactly. So your model is your class, and then your instance is your object. We even use the same terminology often of modeling an instance. So
It is. So here, this should look familiar to people that use Kepware. So all I've gone in here is I've just created some sample tags. These are all sine waves and a couple of user tags that I put in just to make a Boolean expression so I can turn the compressor on and off. But this is going to be familiar. These are all the tags that are going to exist in the OPC server. So just showing that to you. And then as I come in to build the compressor, I've now put in all of the information that's there. So again, site, South Park, area utilities, the asset ID, I've put it as a compressor 1. Typically in asset management, there's an asset ID that's associated with everything. And again, you could put in more information here. I just wanted to keep it simple. And so now what I've done here is that I've actually now labeled that compressor state and tied that to an actual physical tag. So when you were asking earlier about, can I bring in other information? Yeah, absolutely you can. Because over here, if I go into edit this, I can now select any one of my connections, and I can use the information from those to actually bring in that tag information. Making sense?
it does make sense, though. If you set up a connection to MySQL or to SQL Server and you use that there, how would it know when to update the data? Because it's not the same as a PLC that tells you, oh, my value has changed, the compressor's on or the compressor's off.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Okay, stay with me here. So, all right, let's go ahead and back out of here. So there's the instances that we've created. Oh, and the other cool thing is that when you create a compressor that has a submodel to it, you can actually build that model right there. So I just have to build the compressor, and it created all the other instances of whatever those sub models happen to be right there from the same page. So I didn't have to build my motors and then build my compressors. I did it all in one fell swoop, and it'll just continue to do that all the way down as far as you want. So now we're going to get into the flows, and the flows are where we're now going to take the connections that we built in. So we're now connecting to data sets. We built a model that's going to tell us the exact type of data that we need on every one of those models that we're going to do. We created an instance using data from those connections, and now we're going to publish that data. So in this particular case, on compressor 1, we're going to take that OPC data, those OPC tags, and we're going to send it to MQTT, and we're going to send it to an IoT hub. And so this is exactly what it looks like. Triggers every second, how often this thing runs. Right now I have it publish all values, but I could make this to where it only updates on exception. So you remember we've talked about sort of the 4 pillars of a digital, of an IoT technology, is that, it has to be, lightweight, report by exception, open architecture, and then finally all edge driven. Well, that's exactly what this is as well. I just have it publishing all the values because I'm just sending in sine waves just to give you a sense of what's going on in there. So now you get a sense of it. So that's really all you have to do. And these flows are actually active. So I'm publishing all this data right now. So I can actually bring up my.
Before you leave this, just as again to confirm, so in HighByte, you've built the models, a motor, a compressor, and then a motor within the compressor. So you're kind of getting a little bit of digital twin-ish, if you will. Then you're setting up the instances, and in the instances, you're setting up the data connections where the data is going to come from for that instance. And in the flows, then you are figuring out where to send the data and what you are going to send.
Correct. Exactly. That's what we're doing. So here's my MQTT Explorer. I'm just showing you that I'm now publishing all that data over there. I mentioned earlier that we can also, anything that is a subscriber to an MQTT broker can also consume that data. So let's slide over here. I have an ignition window open. Here are those tags. There's your compressors. Again, utilize the unified namespace of, enterprise, site, unit, and it's in the compressors area. There's compressor 1. And for those little sub models that you create in instances, it actually breaks those out further into another folder. And you can see all that information is publishing. It is all live, and the service is running.
So it's coming from what you've just showed us.
That is data that is coming from the HighByte Intelligence Hub. I mentioned earlier that anything that uses that supports the Sparkplug-B. I need to reset this real fast. So anything that is a consumer to the Sparkplug-B can build this out. And it looks like my I need to update my canary. This is supposed to be showing all the tag value, and it's not. So we'll come back to that. We'll edit this in later. All right, so let's get over into the Microsoft Azure. So if you are familiar with Microsoft Azure, there's a couple things you need to do. One is you need to bring in your IoT hub. So I have this as just my IoT hub. This is just the name of it. And then what you need to do is actually connect in a device. And that particular device, I'm just calling it. So this is where you want to give it a device ID of where it's coming from. So this is the enterprise. This is the name of the server, and this is my comp demo. So if you remember earlier, we were talking about when you want to get your connection into your HighByte Intelligence Hub. So again, here back on the Azure, where you need this connection string, that actually comes from this primary connection string right here. And you can actually just copy it and paste it right over, and you're all off and running. So that's where you need to get that all set up. So let's go back into that again. And you can see that I'm now publishing all this data in here. And you can see all that data is coming in and all the classic diagnostics that come with that. So, but all at this point we're doing is we're just collecting that data. So we actually want to use their stream analytics. So now it's going to take information from that IoT hub, and we're going to now publish it over into my Power BI instance. So the way you do that is you have this query. Well, let me back up a little bit. So you have these inputs. So the inputs, just the IoT hub, that is what I call, or what I use for my alias for that connection of the IoT hub. And then you have an output, which is just my Power BI demo, and you set that up in here and make that connection. And so then you write a query on, okay, now what is the data you're going to take from your IoT hub and push it into Power BI? And oddly enough, this uses SQL in order to do that. So I'm going to select everything, but I'm also going to add in a date. And the reason why I've done this is because the time within JSON is always in milliseconds. So it ends up being this number that is very difficult to work with from, unless you're quite familiar with it or you have to do anything. So what I'm doing is I'm now saying, okay, what is this? I'm using a function in here that's now taking that timestamp that comes from the HighByte, and I'm now just converting that over into a more usable time. So I'm selecting all that. I'm going into my Power BI demo. So that's why I have the alias. I'm taking it from the IoT hub. And this is where I have model equals compressor. So if you go back here to the Intelligence Hub, when I created these models over here, it's now going to take this compressor model, and that's what it's now going to push into my Power BI. You can do any kind of query with any of those names that are coming in. So I could have where model equals something else. So say I have 500 models across my enterprise, I can really narrow it down as far as what I'm going to bring in to my Power BI. But that does allow you to do that.
Quick question. So in this SQL statement, I'll review the steps you're talking about for Azure, but in this SQL statement, the from table, their IoT hub, that is a reference to the input
Yes.
in stream analytics.
Yeah. So, the input is this right here, and that's just pulling it right from my IoT hub. So, again, this is the information that it's coming through.
So
you
when
can't
I think
see
of SQL, I think of tables and relational databases, and so this is considered a table at that point. But actually, it's a stream of data.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's a stream of data. It uses a lot of the syntax of SQL. So if you're familiar with building SQL queries, you can do the same type of thing with the data that's here as well. So that's why I just wanted to show that. So now I'm over in Power BI. That's where I'm publishing it. And this is that visualization that you're going to see in the terms of, okay, there's all that information that we just published from HighByte is now available in my Power BI. The difference is I'm not only getting the value of all of those tags, I actually know exactly what it is. It's compressor state, it's discharge pressure, et cetera, et cetera. And I can come in here and I can draw any one of these visualizations and I can recreate it. So I decide, you know what, I don't want to use, say, compressor vibration or motor vibration. I'm going to bring in my discharge temperature, and I want to know my, I guess the pressure is there as well. So I want to see temperature and pressure all on one graph. So I can do that very quickly, all from one, from one act, right here from, if you're familiar with Power BI, you can do that all at once.
Yeah, we do a lot of that work. So you've got the data model that is set up by that SQL statement. So in Power BI, then that data model came from the SQL statement, which was the output for this from Stream Analytics, and then you can create all your dashboard wizardry right here using the typical Power BI tools.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm showing you here, here's your flow and discharge by time. So of the compressor, here's some motor current and speed by time. So you can compare that. And then of course I did recreate this. So when I always show you what a reading view looks like, and here's your compressor state. So here's how many times it stopped and started in the last period of time. And you can get in here, this is all within the last 5 minutes. So now we'll come over here to the reading view. I'm not going to save it. And this is the actual chart that I created. So now I can come over here and filter. So now I just want to look at compressor 1, what's it doing? There's all the data for compressor 1, or I want to look at compressor 2. So I just unselect that, and there's all compressor 2 not showing because now we're live doing a demo. But what I'm getting at is that you can start doing all of these searches where if you just want to go by site, or you want to go by utility compressors, or you want to go by, you're out in some kind of process unit that's consistent, and you have, say a refinery. Well, I want to know what, all of my compressors in this type of unit is looking alike across my enterprise, and do all kinds of data analytics with it. And you can do that all from right here. To take this a step further, it's that if you notice how easy it is just to build dashboards with this type of tool, imagine how easy it is to do AI and machine learning with that, because now you have all of that raw data that you're bringing in, all those raw values in context of everything that you want to know with it. So now it makes it very easy to come in and take that data, and it is a compressor that I'm looking at. I'm looking at compressor vibration, and I'm looking at it across these particular instances. So it makes it that much easier. So again, I mentioned companies that do AI ML around asset health and machinery health. To me, this becomes very powerful. So now if you want to go in and work with a client and get all the connections made to all of those, all your data points that you need in order to make your models work, this becomes a very powerful way to do that across an entire enterprise.
Wow, this is really powerful. Tim, questions, thoughts? And I'll go through kind of a summary of what we've talked about to check that I've got it. But Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, that was pretty amazing. So from the Azure side and Power BI, all that made a lot of great sense. I do have a question um, about the values, and you even touched on it in Power BI. It's raw values, but what if you need to apply some type of business logic? Let's say whether or not a compressor is running or not is a value of is you need to check whether it's zero, whether it's -1, or any negative number, or if it's over some other value. So what if you need to determine what on means? Where would you do that? Because if you do that in Power BI, that means you also have to do it in your web apps, and you also have to do it over here. Would you translate those values anywhere in HighByte or at the PLC, or where might you apply that kind of logic to say all of these things all mean zero? You know, -0.39 is the same as zero.
Great question. I don't have an answer for you on the best way to approach something like that. So let me get back to you on that.
Dave, conceptually, wouldn't it be driven by those 4 pillars of good standard open architecture or of IoT, and one of them being edge driven, where a lot of that kind of logic is defined at the edge, and then it's at that point it's available throughout the rest of the system.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of triggers that can be done here, and that business logic may exist, through one of the connections that you've already made. I have not gotten into the whole, okay, if this is off, then stop doing it, and those types of things. Really, this is just conceptually a high level view of that. But it's a great question, Tim. So let me find out on that.
Yeah, maybe it's something we can cover at some point
Sure.
in another.
Yeah, I even wondered if maybe something would calculate it and then write back to the UNS like, hey, the resolved value, the resolved on-off state is on, versus off, where something else is responsible for figuring it out and writing it back to UNS. I'm not sure.
Cool. So then, given everything we've talked about, I'll go through beginning to end a summary to see if I can get this right. Let me know if I got it right, and then I'm thinking at that point we've got it locked and loaded. So you started. So the idea is to get data from, let's say, theoretically, a compressor and a motor within a compressor, and you're connecting to it via OPC, grabbing OPC, or excuse me, connecting to it with Kepware and pulling OPC tags, and then using HighByte to publish that to 2 destinations. One of them being MQTT broker, specifically the tool is Mosquito. And then the other place to publish that data to would be Azure. And in Azure, then you're specifically using Stream Analytics and to grab the data. And then from Stream Analytics, you're pushing it to Power BI. And theoretically, then at that point, that's when you can throw it over to AI and machine learning. Then going back through that, again, another slightly lower level in HighByte, then you are creating the connections to Kepware, the source, and the destination to Azure and also Mosquito. You're building the models, making sure I'm going through my notes, I didn't miss anything. So then at that point in a HighByte, you're building the models like the compressor and then the motor in the compressor using the tags and all the rest of that. And it looks like in the tags too, you had area, a site and area. So you've got a couple tags or fields in there for that as well to define where they're at within the unified namespace structure. Then you're setting up the instances with the data connections so that it knows the instances model and instances.
It's the specific data connection. So the
That's
model is just, this is the data that you need to have for the model, and then
right,
this is the actual connection into that data.
and that's where the data is coming from. And then third step is you set up the flow. The idea is to define where to send it and what to send. And you've set it up to push to both MQTT broker, Mosquito, as the MQTT broker, and also Azure. Within Azure, then we were looking at the data coming into Stream Analytics, and that's where you set your inputs and outputs. The input is, you called it there, IoT hub or IIoT hub.
Yeah.
And then for the outputs, that's where you're setting it up to push the data to Power BI. And so you were writing a SQL statement using the IoT hub input as the table, as I think of it as the table, to pull the
Mhm.
data in the from clause of the SQL statement to then send that data to Power BI. And then at Power BI, you've got all the data within your data model, and you can
Mhm.
set up the dashboards and do the filtering and all that other kind of fun stuff. And then from
Yeah.
there, again, AI is an option. Did I
Mhm.
cover it all? Miss
Yeah,
anything?
you nailed it. I mean, this is just, I'm only visualizing in here just to show you this is the namespace that comes through.
Yeah.
So, and again, and one of them is ASID, but I have site and I have area, so you can do all those same things as well. So, again, it's a unified namespace. You have to know exactly where everything is through your enterprise, site, area, line, cell. You have to use that, and that gives you the context.
Dave, this is awesome stuff.
I know.